My name is Amelia. I'm 22, and I never thought that death could be the beginning of something that would change my whole life. I was in the hospital, unconscious. My body was broken, my heart had stopped, and it felt like it was over. But suddenly, I felt a light begin to come out of the depths of me, cold, but at the same time inviting. I couldn't see the boundaries, I couldn't feel the body. Just endless silence and a strange feeling that I wasn't alone. He appeared before me, not a man, not an image from the paintings. His eyes carried the entire depth of the universe, and his voice was both soft and loud, like the sound of wind and thunder rolled into one. He called himself Jesus. But this wasn't the Jesus I'd read about in the books. It was an entity that existed outside of time, outside of words. He said to me, "Do you wonder where animals go when they die? You've always thought of them as just a part of this world, but the truth goes deeper." I nodded, unable to speak. He continued, "Animal souls are the keys to another universe, where there is no time, but there is memory. There they gather to wait for a new life, a new form. There they are, the guardians of the balance between light and darkness." I tried to imagine it. A world where there are no human words, where everything is music and color, where every soul is a note in an endless symphony. But then my heart sank with fear. Does that mean they don't disappear? What are they waiting for, like us? What do they live for? He smiled. Not in a human way, but as if the universe itself was smiling through him. Life is not a chain of events, but a circle in which everyone plays a role. When one door closes, the other opens. But why didn't I know that? I whispered. Because fear makes people blind. He took my hand, and I saw, not with the eyes of my body, but with my soul, scenes where animals pass through bridges of light and shadow, where they help people carry their burdens, where every creature is part of a great plan. I realized that death is not the end. But the fear of losing those we love is a real prison. When I returned to my body, the world around me was different. Quiet. Deeper. And scarier at the same time. Because now I knew that beyond death there was no emptiness, but an endless web of destinies and hopes. And somewhere out there, in the vast expanses, my favorite animals are waiting for me, and the way to them is waiting for me. When I opened my eyes, the world around me seemed the same hospital, the same busy faces. But something broke in me, and with it something woke up. Something that couldn't go back to the gray confines of normal life. Every sound was too loud, every light too bright. The air felt denser, but also clearer at the same time, as if I could feel the very life coming in and out of me. I was trying to figure out what had happened. I had experienced death, but death was not what I had imagined. It wasn't a dark tunnel, it wasn't a terrible punishment. She was the threshold. A threshold beyond which a new world has opened up. At that moment, I remembered his words about animal souls, and the question that haunts me is, where do they go? I imagined this world where animals congregate after death, without time, without space, where each creature pulsates with its own life in an endless dance. But at the same time, I had an image of a fragile bridge that connects this world with ours, which is balance between light and darkness. And then I felt fear, not the fear of death, but the fear that we humans too often forget that these souls don't just disappear. That they're part of something bigger that we can't see. Then, in the silence of my room, I felt their presence. Not physical, but spiritual. Thin threads of life that did not break, but only changed shape. Their eyes, full of trust and incomprehension, looked at me from the shadows. I realized that this encounter with Jesus was not an accident. He showed me the truth I needed to tell. The truth that death is not an end, but a transformation, that life is a flow in which everything is connected. But the biggest shock was still ahead of me. I realized that the world we know is fragile and full of fears. That we are afraid of losing not only each other, but also those who cannot speak, who cannot defend themselves with words. Animals are our brothers and sisters in this endless story. And that their fate is a mirror of our own soul. I was lying in bed, and I wanted to scream. But instead, I wrote down everything, every word, every feeling. Because I knew it wasn't just a death story. This is a wake-up call. Now, when I look out the window, I don't just see the world around me. I see infinity. Walking beside us, quiet and strong. Waiting for us to open our eyes. The days after my return were a blur, blurry faces of doctors, empty conversations, words that didn't reach me. My thoughts kept returning to the world I'd seen beyond the edge. The memory of Jesus, the look in his eyes and the soft voice that seemed to cut through the darkness, made my heart beat faster and slower at the same time, as if time had decided to play a trick on me. An internal argument broke out inside me. The human part demanded explanations, logic, proof, guarantees. The spirit craved silence, peace, and mystery. I tried to tell someone, but the words stuck in my throat, lost in the emptiness. No one could understand. Or didn't want to. And then I started hearing them voices. Not in my ears, but in my soul. Thin, fragile, like the whisper of a wind passing through an autumn forest. They were the voices of animals I'd loved and lost, their quiet pleas and thanks, their stories woven into the fabric of the universe. Jesus said that they are the guardians of balance. I realized it wasn't just words. In their silence lies an infinite wisdom that we humans are not prepared to accept. Animals teach us that life is not a struggle for power or money. It is an understanding that we are all connected. That each of us is a part of the other. But this connection is fragile, like glass that can shatter at the slightest touch. The world around me began to change. The people I knew seemed like shadows, lost in their own fears and doubts. They didn't see, hear, or feel anything. And I was a prisoner between two worlds, the worlds of the living and the worlds of the departed. And then, one night, when the darkness deepened to impenetrable, I saw shadows, not evil or good, just shadows moving beyond the edge of the light. I realized that these are the souls of animals that are waiting. Waiting to be heard. To make them understood. At that moment, I realized my mission, to become a voice for those who cannot speak, a bridge between worlds. But the fear remained, the fear that no one would believe it. That I would be judged as insane. I stared up at the night sky, trying to find a sign. And in the depths of space, where the stars seemed not just dots, but eyes, I felt that I was not alone. That the truth I've seen is too great to be silent about. With each passing day, the boundary between the worlds became more and more blurred. I was beginning to see what was previously hidden behind the curtain of everyday life, as if my gaze had become able to penetrate the fabric of reality. Sometimes silhouettes flickered around the edges of my vision, indistinct, like ghosts that reminded me of animals I'd known all my life. They were there, but the others didn't notice them. They looked at me with quiet pain and hope. Their eyes reflected not only the lives they had lived, but also the secrets they had taken with them to this transitional world. They were mirrors of shadows, reflections of things that people often ignore, invisible, forgotten, but alive. Jesus spoke of the balance of light and darkness, of cycles and infinity. I realized now that these creatures weren't just souls. These are transition keepers, memory keepers. But what really shocked me was that their path doesn't always lead to the light. There are places where darkness clings to them, where fear and oblivion threaten to consume even these pure souls. I felt a chill settle in my chest, not physical, but deep, as if eternity itself were whispering a warning. Jesus once said, "Light and dark are two wings of the same bird. Without one, the other cannot fly. For in each of them lies both destruction and creation." I realized that our fears are the very chains that can hold not only the living, but also those who have crossed over to the other side. My heart trembled with the realization that we humans are responsible not only for our own lives, but also for the fate of those who can't speak. Animals are our invisible companions, our reflections in infinity. I lay in the darkness of my room and felt the world around me fill with sounds that I couldn't understand in words. It was the language of shadows, the language of souls, the whisper of eternity. And I knew that I would have to go through my fears to be the one to hear those whispers and tell the world the truth. After that night, when the shadows and whispers entered my reality, the world wasn't the same anymore. Every morning I woke up with a heavy heart and a light heart, as if I was between two worlds, where everything was both clear and hidden behind a veil of mystery. I began to notice the signs. Not words, but symbols, in the simple movement of the wind, in the patterns on the walls, in the smells that came up unexpectedly. It was their speech, the animals I once loved and those who lived in the depths of space and memory. One day I decided to go out into nature, in a small forest near my home in Virginia. There, among the trees, I felt their presence most keenly. Every sound, every rustle, was filled with meaning. The wind passing through the leaves became a song, and the shadows on the ground became a dance of waiting souls. And then, as if out of nowhere, an image appeared. The temple is ancient, towering, built not of stone, but of light and shadow. It was like a living organism, pulsing with life and memory. I stepped inside, and the air around me grew thick, as if it were made up of thousands of voices, not human, but animal voices, those that no one else could hear. They told their own stories, of fears, hopes, pain, and love. Stories that will never be heard on earth, but that live on forever. I realized that this temple is not just a place, but a symbol of our consciousness, our fears and hopes. There, in this space, life and death, light and dark, oblivion and memory intertwined. Jesus was talking about balance, and now I could see how fragile that balance was. If humanity stops listening to these voices, the voices of nature and those who have left, we risk losing not only them, but ourselves. I saw a vision, a world where cities were deserted, where people lost touch with nature and themselves, where darkness filled the voids of oblivion. But there was another side, the world where we awaken, hear the call, and become the guardians not only of our own lives, but of the lives of all beings. I was afraid. Not for yourself, but for all of us. For those who will not hear, who will turn away from the truth, who will remain a prisoner of their own fears. But at the same time, a fire was kindled in me, a fire of hope and responsibility. I had to carry this truth, become the voice of the forgotten. As I walked home, I felt the world around me change. The shadows deepened, but the light began to play in them. I realized that my journey was just beginning. If you want, I'll send you the next chapter, where the secrets will be revealed even more deeply and the moment of great choice will come. When I came out of the temple of forgotten voices, the world didn't seem the same. Everything around us seems to be frozen in a shaky web of time, where every movement is a fluctuation on the edge of being and non-being. The air grew denser and the colors dimmer, as if reality itself had grown tired and was beginning to blur. There was a new emptiness inside me, not the kind that comes from fear or pain, but a bottomless, eternal void, like a pool of light and darkness mixed together. I felt torn apart, each of them pulling me in different directions, to the past, to oblivion, to the unknown. Whispers began to penetrate this inner void, not simple voices, but complex interweaving of meanings that cannot be expressed in words. They came like flashes of light and shadow, suddenly illuminating the darkest corners of my soul. They were the voices of animals, not the ones I knew on earth, but spiritual entities whose lives and deaths were entwined in the endless dance of the universe. They spoke of the suffering, oblivion, and endless anguish of those who remained invisible to humans. With each passing day, the shadows became more palpable, as if the wall between the two worlds was beginning to crumble. I saw a yawning rift in front of me, a fragile and dangerous one that could swallow not only me, but the whole world. Images danced in it, people who had lost touch with nature, forgotten about their smaller brothers, immersed in selfishness and fear. They created a dark space around them, in which the lost souls of animals were stuck, not finding peace. I tried to talk to my loved ones, to share my thoughts, but the words seemed empty. They couldn't understand me, and I couldn't understand them. I could see the disbelief and fear in their eyes, and it was like another door closing, the door leading to understanding and light. Jesus seemed to be my only guide in this world of shadows and light. His words became more and more meaningful. A rift occurs where people forget to listen, where the connection between the living and the eternal is destroyed. But the light that you carry in your heart can heal this wound. I felt the weight of responsibility. My soul has become a battleground, between despair and hope, between fear and faith. Every night, I sank into silence, trying to hear the true voice inside me. But the silence was often deceptive. One night I had a dream, or maybe it was a vision. I was standing on the edge of a precipice, with endless darkness on the other side. Below me, the figures of animals flashed by, stretching their legs and wings toward me, their eyes shining with pain and hope. I tried to reach out, but the gap was too wide. And then light came out of the darkness, soft but powerful. It was Jesus, his eyes blazing with a wisdom beyond the reach of the world. He said, "There is no rift that cannot be healed. Your light is the key that connects the torn worlds. But to do this, you will have to go through your own fears and doubts." From then on, I knew that my journey would not be easy. But to refuse was to leave the rift open, to let the darkness consume not only those I loved, but the whole world. I became a prisoner between two realities, between light and darkness, between hope and fear. And all I had to do was walk forward, clutching the spark that could change everything. With the dawn, the world seemed even more unstable, as if every morning is a new line between being and non-being. I woke up in my room, filled with the soft glow of sunlight, but the storm was still raging inside me. The feeling of a rift between worlds never left me, as if I were standing on the edge of an abyss, peering into an endless darkness, from which came a barely discernible call. The days became a flood of memories and sensations that didn't fit into any concepts. I walked through the streets of the city, and it seemed that every passerby is a reflection of my inner struggle. Their faces were both familiar and alien, their gazes sharp and blank. I felt both a prisoner and a messenger of an unknown secret. One evening I was invited to a church that stood on the outskirts of our town. It was an old building, grand but neglected, like a forgotten monument to the past. Inside, the smell of old wood mixed with the smell of wax and darkness, and every step echoed in the vast empty space. I sat down on one of the wooden benches, feeling time slow down around me. Light filtered through the stained glass windows and painted the walls in a mosaic of reds, blues, and golds. It was the light that held the stories and secrets I was looking for. Suddenly, in that silence, I heard a vibration, not just a sound, but a vibration that penetrated to the very depths of my soul. It was not a voice, but a feeling, a message, like an echo of ancient times, an echo of a word that is born in the heart of the universe. I closed my eyes and saw an image. A gate stood before me, massive and glittering, as if made of pure light and shadow. There was an abyss of uncertainty behind them, but also hope, a chance for a new beginning. The voice I heard in my soul told me that this gate is a symbol of choice. Not just mine, but all of humanity. We are facing a final battle, not a battle with an external enemy, but an internal conflict between fear and faith, oblivion and memory, darkness and light. Jesus said that this battle will decide the fate of all living beings, including those who are voiceless, animals, nature, the world itself. I felt my heart tighten with fear and determination at the same time. This choice will not give rest, it will require sacrifice and strength, but without it there is no future. An internal dialogue began inside me, the voice of doubt warring with the voice of faith. I asked myself, can I carry this light? Am I strong enough? And if I choose incorrectly, who will suffer? But deep down, I felt that I couldn't refuse. This was more than just a test, it was a path to redemption, to rebalancing, to rebirth. As I sat in the darkness of the church, the light gradually faded, leaving me to make my own choice. The wind outside the window whispered something I couldn't understand yet, but I could feel it all over my body. I stood up and slowly walked towards the gate of my vision, not in the physical sense, but in the inner world where destiny is born. This path was like falling and climbing at the same time. Each step was filled with fear and hope, pain and light. I knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but now I was standing on the threshold where not only my fate was being decided, but the fate of all living things. After that night in the church, the world wasn't the same anymore. Every morning felt like the beginning of a new battle, but now it wasn't just about me, it was reflected in every look, in every rustle around me. I could feel the invisible threads of fate stretching through everything and everyone, connecting the souls of the living and the dead, light and darkness. My dreams became prophetic images of burning cities, disappearing forests, and lonely animals that looked at me with pleading and longing. I felt their pain, their fear, their silent cry that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. These visions haunted me. They were like whispers from a forgotten world, a call to action, to awareness. Jesus spoke of the light in my soul as a flame that should not just burn, but burn through the darkness. But the brighter this fire became, the stronger the pressure outside, distrust, doubt, alienation. The people I knew seemed to turn into shadows of themselves. They couldn't understand what I was going through, and they were afraid of me. One night, when the city was quiet, I went outside. The sky was covered with heavy clouds, and only a few glimpses of stars penetrated through them. I walked through the deserted streets, feeling both a stranger and the keeper of an ancient secret. Suddenly an image appeared before me, not flesh and blood, but a radiant figure with eyes filled with unspeakable wisdom and sorrow. It was Jesus, but not the one I knew from books and churches. This one was the epitome of infinite love and harsh truth. He said, "The time has come, but the path is not easy. The light you bring will be tempted by the fire of doubt and despair. But it is through this flame that he will be purified and become stronger." I listened and understood my fears and doubts were part of the test. There was no escaping or hiding from them. I had to go through them to become what I was supposed to be. The words of Jesus echoed in my soul, woven into the fabric of my being. Those who have left continue to live in other forms, in their hearts and memories. But the animals, they go back to their origins, to the light that is not subject to time and space. There is no pain, no fear, only eternal harmony. This knowledge was both a comfort and a challenge. I realized that the world is wider, deeper, and more complex than I ever imagined. And the responsibility for this understanding now rested on my shoulders. The flame in my heart grew brighter, but so did the weight of choice, battle, and hope. I realized that my life would never be the same again. But in this new reality, among the shadows and light, I found my goal, to be a guide between the worlds, a carrier of truth and love. When dawn came, the world around them seemed both fragile and eternal, like a crystal vessel filled with a wavering light. I stood on the threshold of a new age, and my heart beat to the rhythm of the ancient truths that were now mine. For the last time, I saw him, Jesus, not just as a figure from the legends, but as the embodiment of the very love, power and light that permeates the entire universe. His eyes were as deep as the abyss, and there was infinite wisdom in them. He said that life is a chain of endless transformations, and even death is only a transition to a new form of being. Animals that were a mystery and a pain to me have now opened up as souls that have found freedom and peace in the eternal harmony of light. All that we have loved and lost, he said, lives on in the great cycle. Where there is no fear, pain and loneliness, only light and peace. I felt the anxiety and fear that had been living inside me begin to dissolve, giving way to a deep peace and awareness. But along with this came the understanding that this is just the beginning of the road. The world I knew would be tested, and each of us would have to choose a side, light or dark, love or fear. I realized that my mission is to bring light to places where there is none, and to be a voice for those who do not yet hear. As he said goodbye, he said, "The truth is not in external miracles, but in the hearts that are open to love and light. Let your fire burn, no matter what." I opened my eyes and saw the first rays of the sun gently touch the ground. At that moment, I knew that the path ahead of me was not easy, but bright. A path where fear and mysticism are intertwined with hope and faith. If you have reached the end of this story, I am grateful for your attention and invite you to subscribe to the channel where we will search together for light in the dark, answers in riddles and meaning in the mysteries of existence.